The word hero was invented by men who never had to scrub someone else's blood from under their fingernails. This story isn't about glory. It's about how the gods break a demigod's spine just to amuse a pathetic king. 12 times I died, and 12 times the earth spat me back out. I am Heracles, and this is my story. My first task was a death sentence wrapped in a royal decree, a lion whose hide had never known the bite of steel. I went there not as a warrior, but as meat thrown to a beast. Back then, I still believed this would end quickly. I was wrong. The air in Argolis is sweet, cloyingly so. It reeks of oil, sun-scorched marble, and stale wine in golden goblets. And it smells of fear, the kind Eurystheus hides beneath his heavy robes. I remember looking at him, those spindly fingers white-knuckled against the armrests, the damp sheen on his face. He was born into silk while I breathed the dust of the roads. Power is a strange thing. It does not reside in muscle. It lies in the right to speak, without raising one's voice while you stand before him, your own strength feeling like a burden, like iron shackling you to the floor. The gods gave you strength. You shall serve me with it. His voice wheezed like a cracked lyre. The death of Sthenelus left a void that this boy filled with his vanity. He stood there, surrounded by a crowd practiced in bowing, and his words dropped into the silence like stones into a deep well. The Nemean grove, a temple where prayers are no longer offered. The lion. I simply nodded. There was a taste of copper in my mouth, the old premonition that always arrives before bones must be broken. The way to Nemea is a path through dead earth. The vineyards look like the twisted fingers of the drowned, clawing out of the cracked soil. The weeds stand taller than a man, yellow, parched, cutting the skin like cheap steel. Silence. Even the cicadas have gone mute, as if fearing to draw the gaze of whatever breathes in the depths of the grove. I asked for directions. The people. They do not look you in the eye. They shutter their windows, their faces gray as ash in a hearth cold for a week. The lion will find you. Fatigue began to pool in my calves. The sun sank slowly behind the hills, dragging long, filthy shadows in its wake. Darkness here brings no coolness. It brings only a scent, a heavy animal stench of rotting meat, old blood, and matted fur. The smell clings to the throat. You cannot spit it out. The ringing in my ears became constant. It wasn't the sound of the forest. It was the rhythm of my own blood hammering against my temples. A step. Another. The stones crumbled beneath my sandals. The ravine breathed cold, but my back beneath the old Citharon lion skin was slick with sweat. It stung my eyes, blurring the outlines of the cliffs. The world became brittle, uncertain. And then came the sound. It wasn't a roar. It was a concussive blow of air, a vibration that made my teeth ache. He emerged from the cave slowly, massive, a shadow that came alive and filled itself with muscle. He didn't look at me as a hunter. To him, I was merely warm meat that had arrived for dinner. His tail lashed his flanks, dull, heavy. The rhythm of death, time. It didn't stop. It just turned thick like resin. I remember my fingers finding the bowstring of their own accord. The wood of the bow pressed familiarly into my palm. The string sang against my ear, a sharp, thin note. 1 arrow, 2, 3. They should have pierced him through. They should have emerged from the other side, splattering the stones with the black gall of Typhon. But they simply bounced. That sound, the chime of metal against bronze, still haunts my dreams. The arrows fell into the dust, helpless as broken toys. The lion crouched. The muscles beneath his pelt rolled like sea swells in a storm. An inner voice, so quiet against the chaos. Steel will not help you. Only yourself, your breath, your weight, the spring. He was faster than sight. I saw only a flash of yellow lightning. My club, old, heavy, of gnarled oak, rose on its own. The blow landed on his head. The recoil surged through my elbows, shoulders, spine, as if I had struck a mountain. The wood groaned but held. The lion staggered. For a heartbeat his eyes lost focus, turning dull as muddy water. He fell, but the silence lasted only a fraction of a second. Then he was on me. Weight. An incredible, suffocating weight. His claws shredded the air near my throat. I smelled his maw, a stale reek that turns the stomach. My hands. I don't remember how they found his neck. I only knew I could not let go. My fingers sank into the thick, wiry mane. The muscles in my forearms burned as if filled with molten lead. The tremors in my legs became uncontrollable. We thrashed in the mud and our own sweat. Dust choked my nostrils. Every breath was a war for a scrap of oxygen. I squeezed. I heard nothing but my own rasping breath and his fading rattle. Emptiness in my head. There were no thoughts of glory, no fear of Eurystheus, no memory of the gods. Only my fingers turned to stone, only the wool beneath my nails. When he went limp, I didn't realize it at first. I kept holding until my own lungs began to fail. Then, silence, so sudden it was painful. I uncurled my fingers. They wouldn't obey. They remained clawed. I lay on the damp earth, staring at a sky where the first stars were beginning to bleed through. My body felt foreign. It was just a heap of pain wrapped in filthy skin. The taste of blood on my lips, mine or his. I didn't know. The lion lay beside me, a mountain of golden fur that no longer held a threat. He was beautiful in death, far more beautiful than the king in Mycenae. No blade would take the hide. Even the sharpest flint turned dull. Only his own claws could carve what was made invulnerable. I flayed that armor. It was hot, heavy, smelling of a primordial world. My old skin, the one from Cithaeron, seemed like a child's rag now. I left it there in the mire of Nemea. I put him on. The lion's head rested on my crown, his maw becoming my helm. The pelt draped over my shoulders, granting a sense of cold, impenetrable power. When I walked back, the people did not rejoice. They sang no songs. They fled. I saw their eyes through the cracks in their doors. They did not see a man who had saved them from a monster. They saw a new monster. Perhaps a more dangerous one, for it had a human face beneath a lion's mask. Mycenae met me with the cold of stone. Eurystheus. Oh, I will never forget his face when I entered the hall. He didn't look at me. He looked at the hollow sockets of the lion above my brow. His pride evaporated, leaving only the thin, oily essence of a coward. He scrambled into a corner. He hid behind his guards, who could barely hold their spears with trembling hands. His scream was high-pitched, almost thin as a woman's. "Go! Do not dare come near me!" I stood in the center of the hall, and the lion's skin felt heavier than the world. I had done what he asked. I brought him victory. But victory tasted bitter, like wild wormwood. I walked out of the palace into the night. The city breathed with dread. I heard a herald's voice somewhere in the distance, but it meant nothing. All that mattered was that now I would always carry this cold upon my shoulders. This skin will never come off. It has fused with my own. The first labor. They say it was heroism. I remember only the sticky sweat, the taste of dust on my tongue, and how slowly time dies when you tighten your fingers around the throat of a god. The lion was only the warm-up. Victory's taste was brief, a flash of lightning. Eurystheus didn't even give me time to wash the sweat away. The next task didn't smell of fur, it smelled of swamp rot. Lerna was waiting for its portion of fresh meat. The dawn was like rust, a cold orange corrosion settling upon the bronze rails of the chariot. Copreus was shouting something about the king's will, but his voice was merely the buzzing of a persistent fly near my ear. What mattered was different. The stiffness in my back after a night spent on a lion's pelt, and the scent of the damp earth beneath the horse's hooves. I remember Iolaus's gaze that morning. It wasn't the look of a servant or a mere squire. There was something desperate in it, as if he were trying to catch hold of the remnants of our shared reality. "This time I hope you'll take me with you," he said, and I felt his voice vibrate in the cold air. "We'll go there in the chariot. I will be your driver. I'll hold the horses while you hold destiny by the throat." I looked at his hands. They did not yet know the true stench of Lerna. "Agreed," I replied, feeling the heavy lion skin press down on my shoulders. "But on one condition. You will be a spectator only. I face the Hydra man to man. At the time, it seemed fair. I wanted to keep him clean. I didn't know then that in such battles there are no spectators. Everyone who breathes that mist becomes part of the slaughter." We rode on. The wheels bit into the road, and every jolt echoed in my spine as a short, dry ache. Iolaus was silent. His fingers, gripping the reins, had turned white at the knuckles. He was afraid. I was afraid too, but my fear was different. It was heavy like a cast-iron ingot in the pit of my stomach. "Lerna, it is not just water. It is rot that has taken the shape of space. The air there is thick. You don't breathe it. You swallow it like warm slime. It smells of old death, of sodden reeds, and a certain sweetness that makes you gag. The mud squelches beneath your feet as if the marsh is trying to say something with its toothless mouth." Silence. A silence so loud you begin to hear the movement of your own blood in your temples. I loosed the first arrow. The pitch on its tip crackled. The flame seemed pale and out of place in this gray haze. Then a second, a third, and then it stirred. The sound of the Hydra emerging from the quagmire is the sound of wet canvas being torn, a giant, infinite canvas. It didn't crawl out, it squeezed itself from the swamp like black bile from a wound. 10 necks, 10 long, wet stalks ending in blind, ferocious muzzles. The first blow struck the shield. The impact was so great my teeth slammed together, and the taste of iron filled my mouth. Blood. I had bitten my tongue. The ringing in my ears grew high and thin, like the whistle of an arrow that will never land. Exhale. The sword felt impossibly heavy. It didn't slice, it hacked a path through a meaty, slippery resistance. The first head fell into the muck with a wet thud. Black blood splattered onto the lion skin, and I felt it sear even through the beast's thick hide. It smelled of copper and old entrails. And that was when time broke. The seconds stretched out, turning to resin. I saw a blister swell where the severed stump had been. 1, 2. They burst, releasing new muzzles, younger, faster. Their eyes were like glass beads, reflecting nothing but my own exhaustion. Each new maw spewed a yellowish gas that choked the lungs. My throat went into spasms. I hacked again. My forearms began to tremble, not the tremor of cold, but an internal tearing of fibers where the hand ceases to belong to you and becomes merely an extension of the metal. Slippery necks coiled around my torso. The lion skin saved me from the teeth, but I heard my own ribs creak under that cold, reinforced pressure. The Hydra was cold, deathly cold, like ice that has lain under a layer of mulch for 1,000 years. Strike, swing, recoil. The mud sucked at my feet. My left sandal had long since vanished into the mire. My toes felt the cold, greasy substance seeping between them. Every step cost an unthinkable effort. Greasy sweat mingled with swamp filth, stinging my eyes. The world turned murky, a blur of yellow and brown. And then, that crab, a small, senseless creature. The pain in my heel was sudden and absurd, as if the earth itself had decided to sting me. I nearly laughed. It was so lopsided, so treacherous. A titanic struggle and the claw of a petty thing. I crushed it with my other heel, feeling its shell pop through the sole. The crunch was dry and short, like the sound of a twig snapping in winter. "Iolas!" My voice was a rasp, barely forced from a throat clogged with dust and toxic vapors. The vow of the spectator crumbled under the weight of the first real agony. Iolaus didn't just help, he brought fire. When the torch touched the first neck, there was a hiss like a scream. The smell of charred, rotten meat cut through the stench of the bog. It was the smell of the end. I saw the scorched flesh contract, turning black, sealing off life. The head stopped growing, but blood continued to pulse from the stumps, drenching my knees in a hot, thick current. We worked like a synchronized machine. I hacked, he cauterized, hack, sear. The world narrowed to a single motion. I no longer saw the Hydra as a living thing. It was a wall that had to be dismantled brick by brick. My lungs burned. Every breath was a mouthful of glowing sand. My eyes stung from the acrid smoke of the torch and the poisonous blood. Every heartbeat throbbed in my fingertips. How many were left? 3, 5. At some point I stopped counting. I simply saw a neck, and I struck. My arm no longer ached. It had gone numb. My body had become a mechanism moving on inertia. The emptiness in my head was absolute. No thoughts of glory, no thoughts of Eurystheus. Only the rhythm, the crunch of vertebrae, the hiss of fire, my own wheezing. The last head was the hardest. It would not yield. It looked at me with such hatred that I felt it knew something about me that I didn't know myself. Its eyes were not animal. Within them burned an ancient cold fury. When it finally parted from the body, I felt no relief, only a weariness so deep I wanted to collapse beside that fleshy mound and never get up. The head in the mud still worked its jaws. Its fading eyes continued to track me through the veil of filth. I carried them all out, one by one. I dragged those slippery, heavy remains through the muck, my fingers sliding over cold scales. I buried them deep, very deep. I placed a massive stone on top. I wanted the earth to swallow this shame, this pain, this endless stench. And then, the arrows. I remember dipping the tips into a black pool of blood. It was thick, like tar. I saw my reflection in that liquid, a distorted face masked in dust, soot, and a life that wasn't mine. Now my weapons didn't just kill. They carried Lerna with them. They carried this rot. Every arrow became a curse waiting its turn in the quiver. The road back was slow. The horse's hooves now sounded soft against the rain-soaked earth. The sun was setting, but its light seemed artificial to me now, like a painted canvas. Iolaus remained silent for a long time, staring at his scorched hands. Then he turned to me. His face was pale, his eyes too wide. "Will you not grow proud, Heracles?" he asked, his voice trembling like a taut sinew. "Victory over such a beast, it can blind a man. My father and your grandsire, Perseus, always said, 'Fear not the enemy. Fear what you feel when the enemy falls.' He said mortals perish not only from a lack of strength, but from a surplus of it. When there is too much strength, it begins to burn a man out from the inside, leaving only a shell." I looked at him. My hands were coated in a dry, black crust. "A surplus of strength," I laughed. It was a short, bloodless sound that held nothing but exhaustion. "Look at me, Iolaus. Where do you see strength? I feel like a hollow jar that's been rolled in filth. Strength is not something in me. Strength is something that passed through me and moved on, breaking everything living along the way. He wanted to protest, opened his mouth, but said nothing. He saw my eyes. There was no pride in them. Perseus knew how to cut off the Gorgon's head, I continued, looking into the distance where the sky was turning purple. But did he know how to wash the smell of it from his hands? Mortals die of strength because they are only clay, and clay shatters if you pour molten gold into it. I am not proud. I am just tired of being the clay. I felt the Hydra's blood drying on my skin. It tightened, cracked, turned into a thin black rind. I knew I would wash it off, but I also knew the scent of Lerna would stay in my nostrils forever. It had become my own scent. Mortals die of strength. Perhaps. But sometimes they simply become part of it. Part of the beast they have just killed. My hands were still shaking. It wasn't from fear or weariness. It was the sensation that something inside me had also been seared by the fire, and nothing will grow there now. Only a flat, black wasteland. We rode toward Mycenae. The sun finally slipped below the horizon, leaving behind the cold ash of evening. Lerna hadn't ended. It had simply moved into my memory. Now I am the marsh myself, where something has settled and lies in wait. Can I ever wipe this metallic taste from my tongue? Unlikely. It is part of my voice now, part of every arrow in my quiver. When I shoot next time, I will know. I am not killing with wood and iron. I am killing with Lerna. The world grew quiet again, only the creak of wheels and Iolaus's soft breathing beside me. He thinks we won. I only feel the cold rising from my feet, the cold of swamp water that will never dry, no matter how many suns rise over this cursed land. Only darkness ahead and the rusty glint of bronze in the last rays of the day. I thought the Hydra's venom was the worst of it. I was wrong. The worst of it is time. Eurystheus ordered me to catch something faster than the wind, not to kill it, but to hollow out my soul through an endless run. Arcadia became my prison for an entire year. Salt. It is everywhere. On my lips, in the corners of my eyes, deep in the fissures of palms turned to gnarled bark from the bite of the axe. I remember the taste of my own sweat, bitter, with the aftertaste of iron. A year of Mycenaean peace washed away by one brief visit from Coprius. His voice sounded like the screech of ungreased wheels, the hind, golden horns, brazen hooves. As we marched into Arcadia, I could not feel my own strength. Strength is a delusion. You think you are powerful until you collide with time. And there, in the mountains, time flows differently. It does not run. It flows around you like the cold water of a highland river, leaving a sediment of exhaustion upon your bones. Mud, the deep, gray mantle of the earth. We clawed into it with our fingers, the stairs we hewed into the cliffs. Every strike of the hammer shuddered through my spine. It wasn't beautiful. It was filthy. Limestone dust mingled with the icy water of clouds, drifting through us, hardening upon my face into a cement mask. And then the true mountains began, a world where stone displaces the sky. The crags of Arcadia are the ribs of the world, jutting through the skin of existence. We hacked through thickets, and every fallen tree groaned as if a god were dying within it. The timber was damp and heavy. It smelled of mold and antiquity. We threw trunks across chasms, and I saw the leaden mist swirling at the bottom, a place that had never seen the sun. One false step, and you become part of that mist. I remember the cold, that specific cold of the heights that doesn't just bite the skin, but creeps inside into the very marrow of the bone. Avalanches. They do not sound like thunder. They sound like the whisper of 1,000 hungry mouths. Icy dust crawled under my tunic, pricking my flesh with a million tiny needles. My fingers turned blue, numb, hooks of flesh scratching at the icy crust of the rocks. We climbed higher to where storm clouds drifted just above our heads. I felt their weight. The hair on my arms stood up from the tension in the air. Every breath at that altitude is a struggle. The air is thin. It does not feed the blood, it only mocks it. And then, a flash. It sliced through the gray twilight like a blade through old cloth. The first rays of the sun stained the snowy peaks a soft pink, the color of a fresh wound. Gold. The hind stood upon a ledge. Her brazen hooves gripped the stone. I heard her breathe, a sound purer than my own wheezing. A low, heavy hum thrummed in my ears like the sound of a distant rockfall. But she was silence. Why did I not bring my bow? She must remain alive. A leap, and time tore apart. I ran. I did not know the human body could endure the state of decay for so long. My lungs burned. Every breath was a swallow of scorched ash. Heels bloodied. The mud of Arcadia gave way to the sands of the northern steppes, then to the needles of the forests. But the scent of the hind did not fade. She smelled of ozone and wild herbs. We ran for months, or years. The days blurred into a single endless ribbon of light and shadow. The sun became an enemy. It seared the last remnants of moisture from my mouth. I chewed leaves I could not name just to feel some wetness on my tongue. The taste of bitterness became my only companion. Iolaus vanished somewhere beyond the horizon of memory. All that remained was the rhythm of my footsteps and the clatter of brazen hooves ahead. Thump, 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 thump. Those weren't hooves. It was my heart hammering against my ribs, trying to break out of this cage of meat. Hyperborea. There the sky is the color of a dead fish. The cold is so thick you can touch it with your hand. The river Ister. Water black as oil. She stopped. I saw her eyes. Large, dark mirrors. There was no fear in them. There was something worse. A question. As if she were asking me, why do you destroy yourself for that which does not belong to you? My muscles trembled so violently I could hear the sound. A fine, high-pitched hum of fibers tearing. I reached out. Fingers caked in layers of filth nearly brushed the gold. 1 centimeter. 1 lifetime. She bolted. Again. Back toward Arcadia. The movement was so effortless it made me sick. The language of my joints was the language of iron. Hers was the language of the wind. The moment it all ended was not a flash of glory. It was a slow guttering of resistance. Arcadia met us with a damp fog that clung to the skin like wet wool. We stood facing one another, I, whose muscles had turned to knotted ropes from the endless pursuit, and she. She was no longer the wind. She had become flesh. I saw her hide quiver on her flanks, her spindly legs shaking. The hind did not submit to me. She submitted to the exhaustion that eventually grinds down all living things. Her eyes. There was no fear. There was a weariness of such scale that it felt cosmic. I took a step. My boot squelched in the mud. Every movement echoed in the back of my head with a dull, throbbing pain. The world narrowed to the distance of an outstretched arm. My fingers slowly closed in on the gold. I expected her to vanish, but she stood still. Only a slight tremor passed through her body. When I touched the horns, the metal was not warm. It was searingly cold. I felt her pulse through the gold, a fast, erratic beat, as if a small bird were trapped inside her. I felt no triumph, only a heavy metallic void. I brought her to the ground, gently, but with the heavy inevitability of stone settling upon stone. The scent of a wild beast mingled with my own salt stench. Ropes bit into my shoulder as I bound her legs, those same brazen hooves that had led me through hell for a year. She did not struggle. She simply stared at the sky. I hoisted her onto my shoulders. My spine answered with a dry crack, like an old beam in a derelict house. Her head lay against my cheek. I heard her breath, short, ragged. We became one, a tired demigod and a broken divine toy. And then, her. Artemis appeared on the path suddenly, a slender maiden in a short, light tunic, yet there was so much steel in her bearing that the surrounding trees seemed like rotting reeds. In her hands a hunting bow, across her shoulders a quiver full of death. Her face was beautiful and yet merciless, like a winter sun. Her eyes blazed with fury. "Oh, greedy mortals!" Her voice was not a shout, yet it rebounded off the cliffs like thunder. "Why do you hunt my creature?" I knew her, the goddess whose purity was sharper than a knife. I stood before her, encrusted in filth, sweat, and another man's will. I felt every one of my sins under that gaze. Every word had to be shoved through the layer of dry dust on my lips. I spoke to her of Zeus, of the command, of the yoke borne not by me but by my blood. But most importantly, I gave her a promise as quiet as the rustle of dry leaves. She will return. I will not take her life. I will only show her to that worthless lump of flesh hiding behind the walls of Mycenae, and then I will undo the bonds. She will be yours again soon, goddess. Her gaze softened. It was the understanding of a hunter. She stepped toward the bound hind, and I saw her fingers, long and clean, touch the golden horns I had just gripped with my filthy paws. "Go your way, Heracles," she said, and her voice became like the wind in the pines. "I will not take the prize from one who has become a slave to his own fate. But remember, she returns to me." She vanished, simply dissolved into the air, leaving behind only the scent of pine needles and a lingering chill in the lungs. Mycenae, the stifling stench of the city, smoke from the pyres, the smell of waste, the crowds. Eurystheus sat in his chair, his face oily with grease and fear. He looked at the hind, but he saw his own death. My body was black with the grime of the road, and I saw him recoil in nausea at the sight of me. "Take her!" I opened my fingers. Fulfilling the promise was easier than carrying the weight. A golden flash, the strike of brass on stone. The hind vanished instantly, as if she had never been, and once more, only rust, dust, and the taste of blood on a bitten lip. I still feel the weight of that hind on my shoulders, even now when my hands are empty. They call it a labor, but I only remember how hard it was to breathe in Hyperborea, and the smell of a sacred animal's wool when it is soaked with your human sweat. Now she is free, but I am not. It does not wash off, not with any rain. The hind surrendered to exhaustion, but not to me. My legs still remembered the rhythm of the chase when the order came to climb. Erymanthus. There was no grace there, only rage wrapped in bristles and the blood of friends mixed with black wine. Cold. It doesn't start with the snow on the peak, but with a premonition in the small of the back. When Copreus appears for the fourth time, his voice sounds like dry parchment rasping against dry stone. Another command. The fourth knot on the noose. Eurystheus tightens around my neck, while he sits in his gilded comfort. The Erymanthian Boar. I look at my hands. The clay of past roads still clings beneath my fingernails. The peasants below, at the foot of the mountain, smell of despair, cheap sweat, and sour earth. I have seen their plots, the mangled black flesh of the fields, crops torn out by the roots, crushed fruit bleeding sweet, rotten juice. This is not just hunger. It is a humiliation. The land they nursed for months has been turned into a bloody mash by some brute force, a force that knows no law, only hunger and tusks. To catch him is no great trick, I tell Iolaus, but my mouth tastes of bitterness, as if I've swallowed ash. I know that the path to the beast lies through another kind of bestiality, the centaurs, half men, half horses, born of the mist and Ixion's dishonor. I remember the tale of Ixion, how he pushed his father-in-law into a wolf pit of glowing coals to avoid paying the bride price. I can almost smell it, the scent of burning human flesh, sickly sweet and nauseating. And Zeus, great and inscrutable, did not merely cleanse the murderer. He drew him close to his throne. There, on Olympus, amidst the ambrosia and the light, the mortal craved what belonged to a god, Hera. To measure the depth of his fall, Zeus crafted a deception, Nephele, a phantom woman of cold mist. From this lawless union, from the embrace of void and greed, they rose, the centaurs. Ixion now turns forever on a fiery wheel in Hades, while his children, those cruel, lawless creatures, have drifted from Thessaly to here. They lie in wait for anyone who walks on two legs, ready to trample them into the mire with their heavy hooves. Only two among them have hearts. Wise Chiron, whose immortality is a gift and a curse entwined, and Pholus, hospitality amidst the wild. Iolaus wants to come with me. His young breath is clean. He still believes in the songs of heroes. But I feel my own muscles tighten with the urge to be alone with this weight. Heroism does not smell of laurel. It smells of stale fear and iron. No, friend, I will deal with the centaurs alone. The road to Erymanthus is an endless rhythm of footsteps, one after the other. Dust chokes the pores, the sun sears the nape of the neck, and then, sudden as a blow, comes the mountain's icy breath. I see them from afar, herds charging down the slopes in a fit of madness. The thunder of their gallop vibrates in my chest like distant drums. They aren't running toward anything. They are fleeing their own fury. And then, the cave. Quiet. Unexpectedly still. Pholus stands at the entrance as if carved from the very stone of the mountain. He is not young. His coat is dusted with the ash of time, but his movements are fluid. In his eyes sits a law older than these beasts. "Who are you?" he asks. His voice is deeper than the rumble of a rock slide. "A hunter," I answer, masking my exhaustion with short words. "I need the boar." "That boar plagues us as well," Pholus says. "Enter. Be my guest." We step into the cool of the cave. It smells of wet stone and old wineskins. Pholus draws out the wine, a massive skin, its leather gleaming with age. When he unties the knot, the air in the cave shifts instantly. This wine smells of the Thessalian sun, of herbs that no longer grow anywhere, of something so ancient it makes my head swim. It is thick, nearly black. I take a swallow, and fire races through my veins, loosening the knotted tendons. The aroma spills down the slope. It seeps through the oak woods, climbing higher toward the crags. Centaur wine is a clarion call. And then comes the thudding. At first, it's a faint vibration beneath the heels. Then, a roar that shakes loose fine grit from the cave's ceiling. They sensed it. They descended like an avalanche. Dozens, hundreds of legs, eyes bloodshot, tusks bared, froth on their lips. They don't want to drink. They want to destroy the one who touched their treasure. Pholus flinches. His hospitality is a thin wall against the ocean of his brother's rage. They demand my death. I feel no fear, only the familiar heavy fury that wakes in the gut and rises to the throat. I snatch burning brands from the fire. Smoke fills the lungs, eyes sting and water, but the hand does not shake. A throw. Another. The centaurs howl in pain as the fire bites into their fur. Call Chiron, they scream, retreating into the shadows. Chiron is here? I shudder. The wise teacher, he who knows the secrets of herbs and stars, among this herd of madmen? I step out of the cave, wanting to lower my weapon, to call to him, but a hail of stones finds me, a barrage of blows, a pain in my shoulder, sharp, hot, as if a white-hot knife had been driven home. The world narrows to the tip of my arrow. I draw the bow. The string bites into my calluses, slicing the skin to the blood. Arrows smeared with the black venom of the Hydra. A death that knows no miss and offers no chance. The hiss, one by one, bodies fall into the dust, twitching in convulsions. The poison acts instantly. The blood blackens in the veins before the heart can manage a final beat. Nephili, their primal mother, took pity on them. The sky turned to lead, and the rain broke. Heavy, cold, it churned the dust, blood, and wine into a reddish slush. The earth beneath my feet turned slick. The four legs of the centaurs hold them better on the mire than my two. My boots slip. The taste of rain is metallic, mixed with the salt sweat blinding my eyes. I see the target. The fiercest, strongest centaur, a boulder raised above his head. The release. My foot slides in the mud. The arrow sings its short, hissing song and flies true. To the wrong mark. It passes through the chaos of battle and finds a target in the distance, in the shadow of the trees. There stood the one who did not fight. That groan. It was not like the roar of a beast. It was the sound of shattering crystal, the sound of wisdom flickering out under the weight of chance. I drop the bow. I run through the bodies that are still twitching. Chiron? My own name feels foreign to me in the silence that has suddenly collapsed upon the mountain. I am on my knees in the mud. The old centaur looks at me, immortal. His fate is to live forever, but now his flesh is seared by a poison that cannot be burned out. It will gnaw at him for centuries, refusing to let him die. I absolve you, he whispers. Every word is a spasm. But this pain, it is unbearable. He begs the gods for death. He trades his immortality for the freedom of Prometheus. I feel, in that moment, something in the world snap into place. A great injustice is redeemed by a great suffering. The earth trembles. Zeus has heard. Chiron's breath stops. His gaze turns to glass, and in it I see the reflection of a distant, untainted sky. Pholus and I carry him into the cave. My hands shake, not from fatigue, but from emptiness. Pholus. He is so defenseless in his grief. He takes that same arrow, examining it. A tiny sting of death. Careful! My cry is a second too late. The arrow slips from his fingers, a tiny prick in the hoof. Pholus doesn't even have time to be surprised. His eyes close, and he falls beside Chiron. Two bodies. One, majestic in its passing. The other, senseless. I bury them all. I carry the slain into the cave like bloodied dolls. Every step echoes as a dull ache in my joints. I seal the entrance with a massive stone. It is not just a tomb. It is the place where I left a piece of my soul. Now, the boar. I have no fury left, only a mechanical persistence. I hunt him through forests where the trees have braided themselves into rusty thickets. Branches claw at my face, blood dries into a crust on my cheeks. I don't see the beast. I smell him, the stench of rotting bark, wild wool, and animal tension. We run for days. The perception of time has vanished. There is no morning, no evening, only the rasp in my lungs and the boars wheezing ahead. The ringing in my ears grows so loud I cannot hear my own footsteps. I drive him higher. To where the air is so thin, every breath cuts the throat like a blade. There the snow lies, white, virgin, indifferent. The boar is a mountain of muscle, but he is heavy. He plunges into the white abyss. Snow packs into his maw, blinding his eyes. His tusks slash the air, but he is no longer a predator. He is a prisoner of the cold. I throw myself upon him, the smell of steaming bristle. The steam from his nostrils burns my face. I feel his heart through my own chest. It beats fast like a drum in wartime. I bind him. The ropes bite into my palms, stripping the skin, mixing my blood with his sweat. I heave this living mountain onto my shoulders. The way back is pure torture. The weight of the boar presses me into the earth. Every step is a defiance of gravity. The muscles in my legs shudder so violently it feels they will tear from the bone. But I walk. Mycenae, the glint of gold, which seems to me now false and dim. Eurystheus waits, but when the boar, catching the scent of the city, lets out a final, rage-filled roar, the king breaks. All his pathos drains away like cheap paint in the rain. He hides in a great bronze vat. The sound of his trembling hands against the bronze is the only music he deserves. I laugh. The laugh is hoarse, more like a cough. "Roast him," I toss to the crowd. The feast begins. Greasy smoke rises to the sky. People tear the meat with their hands, shouting my name, and I stand apart. My hands still smell of snow, of Chiron's blood, and the wine of Pholus. The fourth labor is done. The feat is inscribed in the scrolls, but under my fingernails is the earth of Erymanthus, which can never be washed away. It will stay there forever as a memory of the price we pay for other men's fears. After the mountain snows, Eurystheus decided to finish me with humiliation, the gold of my lineage. He chose to drown it in the filth of 30 years. Elise was waiting for my shovel, but it didn't know I would bring a river with me. The air, it doesn't just smell, it has weight. It settles on the tongue as a yellow, sweet-rot film that you cannot spit out. When I breathe, my lungs feel as if they are being coated in hot silt. This isn't mist. These are the fumes of 30 years of shame, baked hard under the sun of Elise. Eurystheus laughed. I didn't see it with my face. I felt it against my back as I walked away. His laugh was dry, like the rasp of a rusted bolt. He didn't just want to exhaust my muscles. He had seen them coiled in the Hydra, strained beneath the Nemean's hide. He wanted something else. He wanted the son of the Thunderer to stand knee-deep in filth, shovel in hand, breathing the excrement of cattle until the gold of his glory tarnished, buried under a layer of common reeking mud. Humiliation has a sound. It is the buzzing of a million flies. A pulsing black cloud over the stables of Augean. Walls, thick porous blocks of stone crusted with salt and damp. I press my forehead against them. The stone is cold, but inside me there is only a dull, heavy throbbing. The rushing in my ears drowns out even the lowing of the herd. It is blood. It hammers against my skull, reminding me who I am. My forearms tremble, not from fear, from a loathing that has crossed into physical pain. Every movement feels like wading through thick tar. Sweat runs down my collar, mixes with the dust, turns sticky and acrid. It stings my eyes. I look at these hands, the same hands that throttled the Nemean beast. Now they are meant to grope through the offal of 1,000 bulls. Augean stands on the hill. His cloak glitters in the light. He is the son of Helios. He is used to the sun. And I stand in the shadow of his sin, his greed, his impurity which he has hoarded for decades like a treasure. Time, it's different here. It's frozen, like the crust beneath my feet. Seconds stretch, becoming viscous. One day, he gave me one day to become nothing, to turn into a slave, a scavenger, a laughingstock for every shepherd who will tell the tale tomorrow in the tavern. How the great hero reeks of dung. No. The shovel? No, I drop it. The sound of wood hitting stone is short, sharp, like a crack of thunder. I will not fight his filth with his tools. Alpheus and Peneus, two rivers, two cold, indifferent gods flowing side by side. I feel their power before I even see the water, the cold breath of moisture, the scent of wet stone and raw life. I walk toward them. My legs are heavy. Every step is a war with gravity. The earth beneath me squelches, sucking at my sandals. There is the taste of iron in my mouth. Did I bite my cheek? Or is this just the taste of fury seeping through my teeth? I begin to dig. The rock doesn't give way at first. My fingers go numb. Under my nails, black earth and blood. I can't feel my hands, only a blunt pressure in the joints. The clay clings to my skin. It is everywhere. I become part of this landscape, a mass of muscle and mire. A strike, another. The cliff cracks. This isn't just labor, this is a release. I hear the water change its tone. At first it was a quiet murmur. Now it's a low, guttural roar. The river senses freedom. Like me, it does not want to flow in a dictated channel. I break the last barrier. It didn't come as water. It came as a living thing. White foam twisted into gray knots. The first wave hit the stable walls with a sound like the sky falling. A crash, the splintering of wood, and a sudden piercing freshness. Water knows no shame. It doesn't choose what to wash. It simply takes everything that has no roots. I stand on the high ground, watching the torrents burst into the dark halls of the stables. Black mountains of filth are swept away in heartbeats. Everything Augeas spent 30 years accumulating, everything Eurystheus meant to choke me with, it all hurtles into the abyss, into the sea, into nothingness. The stench vanishes. It is replaced by the smell of wet sand and ozone. The roar of the water in my ears grows quieter than the sound of my own breath. Ragged, torn breathing. I feel a vacuum, the same emptiness that comes after slaying the Hydra, after the long pursuit of the Ceryneian Hind. When the goal is reached, but the body does not yet believe in peace. My muscles continue to twitch with residual tension. I look at my hands. The water washed them first, but under the skin, in the very marrow, I still feel that weight. Humiliation doesn't wash away as easily as dung. It settles inside, hardening into cold calculation. Augeas, his face. I remember his shadow when he refused to pay. He thought he had outsmarted me, that the rivers were not my work. He didn't realize that I am the river. His voice was thin, like the whine of a mosquito against the evening silence. You didn't do the work yourself. Those words stuck in me like a splinter. Not a pain, but a constant, nagging reminder. Memory shifts. I see myself years later. Elise again. But now it's not mud under my feet. It's the ash of burned gates. The smell of blood is different. It's heavier than dung, but more honest. The bronze of my sword is cold. It does not tremble. I remember looking into Augeas's eyes before the light in them went out. There was no majesty of a god's son in those eyes, only the fear of a petty shopkeeper when the debt collector arrives. It was a second kind of cleansing. The first was water, the second steel. Now there is silence. Olympia, a plain where the wind stirs the silver leaves of olive trees. I measured this distance myself, 600 of my own paces, step by step across this land, liberated from the mire. I called it a stadion. There is no scent of decay here anymore. Here the air vibrates with the anticipation of strength. I founded these games, the Olympic Games, not so the gods could delight in our pride. I did it to wash the shame of the shovel from my memory, so that every man who steps onto this field knows. Your body may be covered in dust, it may drip with sweat and smell of the iron in your blood, but that is the sweat of the struggle. not the sweat of humiliation. I established the law, the sacred truce. While the contests endure, swords must rust in their scabbards. Because I know how easy it is to turn the world into a stable, and how hard it is to find the clean river within yourself to wash it all away. My voice. It sounds hollow in my head. I still feel that sticky film on my neck. Sometimes, when the darkness is absolute, I feel as if I am standing before those walls again, gripping a handle that bites into my calluses. And then I call the river. I hear the Alpheus breaking through the dams of my memory, flushing out the last trace of a king who thought he could stain the son of a god. Only the stone remains, the cold, white stone of Olympia, and the sense that somewhere beyond the horizon, Eurystheus still trembles when he hears my laughter in the sound of rushing water. Let him. I have learned to command the elements, and the elements know no shame. They simply are. Did it really happen? Or did I invent these athletic feasts, these races and wrestling matches, just to close my eyes to how deep the smell of that day settled inside me? The sun is setting. Shadows grow long, like the memory of injustice. I close my eyes. I hear only the water, and the thud of feet on the sand running toward the horizon. The rivers washed away the filth, but they couldn't wash away the stench of shame. I hadn't even straightened my back when the sky over Stymphalis turned to rust. Bronze wings, copper beaks. Ares unleashed his birds to see if my blood could flow as fast as the waters of the Alpheus. Death didn't have its usual sharp edge here. It had dissolved into the very air. The marsh breathed a heavy, sodden stagnation, the stench of standing water and molding rot, tangled with the sickly sweet vapor of decay, coating the tongue like a bitter film of copper. The air of Arcadia had run out. It turned thick and motionless, like setting resin. The only thing that displaced it was a harsh squawk and the dry iron rustle of wings. The creatures of Ares hadn't just conquered this land. They had forced it to choke on its own helplessness. I stood on the edge and felt it for the first time, my will draining through my fingers like water. Endless. It was endless. The black mirror of the mire spilled out to the horizon, swallowing the silhouettes of the mountains and any hope of a fair fight. I froze in despair. To take a step meant sinking without glory, suffocating in the muck without ever drawing a blade. The thick reeds stood like a wall, mocking my strength. The hero who had slain the Hydra suddenly withered before this motionless, stinking mass. I didn't know what to do. My hands, built for the struggle, hung useless. The world narrowed down to the sensation of my own impotence before this silent void. The water was still, like frozen pitch. Ahead, nothing but a jagged wall of reeds, sharp as razors, quagmire that held no man, and thickets no boat could breach. A dead zone. The birds had scorched it, their toxic droppings seared into the earth, rendering it barren for decades, turning once blooming valleys into ulcerated wastes. No crickets sang here, no leaves rustled. Only the stench of decomposing shepherds and travelers unlucky enough to be caught here at twilight. Man-eaters, bred by the god of war. They knew no hunger that could be sated. Tightness in the chest. The weight of the shield on my left arm was becoming unbearable, and the fight hadn't even begun. Then she came. The air turned sudden, dry and sharp, like the moment before a lightning strike. Athena Pallas emerged from nothing. Her armor didn't reflect the light. It drank the gray gloom of Stymphalis. There was no pity in her eyes, only the cold, crystalline calculation of a strategist. It snapped me out of the trance. She held out 2 copper discs. "Take them, son of Zeus." Her voice was cold as a mountain spring. Your strength is worth nothing here. You cannot run on water, and your sword cannot reach the clouds. I touched the metal. It vibrated as if the heart of a volcano beat inside it. What are these? My voice sounded like a stranger's, raspy from the marsh damp. Crotala. Hephaestus forged them in the bowels of Etna. For 7 nights he wove the screams of subterranean winds and the moans of red-hot anvils into this copper. This is a voice not meant for mortal ears. Stand on that hill. Make them fly. She looked toward the marsh where the monsters nested. These are no ordinary predators, Heracles. Ares raised them as living weapons. Their beaks and talons are brass. They tear through armor like dry leaves, and their feathers, solid bronze. They rain them down from the heights like a storm of arrows. If they catch you in the open, you'll be a sieve before you can even shout my name. I took the symbols. The metal burned my palms with cold. When I climbed the hill and struck them together for the first time, the sound didn't just travel through the air, it tore it open. It was a physical blow. The sound vibrated through muscle, through bone, twisting joints, making my eyeballs quiver in their sockets. And the sky cracked. Thousands of wings, the screech of metal on metal. It wasn't birdsong, it was the sound of 1,000,000 knives being sharpened at once. The sun vanished instantly. In place of light, a living, pulsing cloud of bronze unfolded overhead, breathing rust and fury. The first feather fell beside me. It didn't stick in the dirt, it punched through stone, leaving sparks in its wake. A whistle, short, like a whip crack. Another. The air grew dense with blades. I felt the skin on my neck crawl, but it wasn't fear of the pain. My spine turned to ice from the sheer absurdity of it. It was the shame of a living legend facing a mechanical, soulless meat grinder. My might, which had crushed boulders, felt like soft wax under this faceless bronze rain. For a moment, I went numb. The world stopped being an arena for heroes. It became a death trap. I will die here, it flashed through my mind. Not as a thought, but as a cold fact. Not by the sword, not in a glorious battle, but ripped to shreds by 1,000 tiny, faceless blades. My legs grew heavy, as if filled with marsh mud. My heart beat with the rhythm of a convict facing a blind wall. In that moment, I was no son of a god. I was a target, an animal craning its neck for the axe. My hands, used to crushing the throats of monsters, trembled helplessly. They didn't know how to strike the air when the air was exploding with metal. I fell, pressed myself into the mud beneath my shield. The splash of marsh sludge burned my face. It got into my mouth, bitter, reeking of peat. Athena was gone. I was alone. Tremors in my forearms. Fingers won't move. They felt numb, as if already dead. Thud, thud, thud. The bronze feathers hammered against the shield. Every strike echoed in my skull. I could hear my own pulse, the panicked drumming of a cornered beast. My saliva turned bitter. The taste of iron on my palate became so real, I began to chew my own lips without feeling the pain. I felt every notch on the inside of the shield. Oxygen was failing. Every strike from above made my whole body flinch, as if they weren't hitting wood, but my very vertebrae. But then the fear began to shift. The paralysis broke. I realized if I don't move now, I never get up. The bitter taste of filth on my lips suddenly became fuel. How long did I lie there? A minute? An eternity? Time turned viscous. I saw through a crack. The sky was shuttered with rust. They circled, the bastards of divine wrath, their copper beaks glinting in the scraps of pale light. The rage came from deep in my gut. It shoved me upward with a hoarse animal exhale. Stand up. My feet slipped. My back was strained to the limit, muscles tight as ship cables, heavy with molten lead. I struck the crotala again. The thunder forged by Hephaestus hammered the last of the fear out of my joints. Then, the bow. It was the mechanics of slaughter, fingers pulling the string, again and again, until the skin on my tips split and the blood made the wood slick. Every shot a kick to the shoulder, every flight of an arrow, a brief flash of hope in this bronze chaos. The crunch of bone under metal feathers, the sound of an arrow punching through a bronze chest, heavy carcasses slapping into the black water. The marsh devoured its own. They fell like broken machinery, washing away the toxic filth with their own black blood. The air grew hot with the stench of scorched feathers and split innards. I shot until my fingers were nothing but a raw wound, until my vision blurred. And then, emptiness. A sudden, painful quiet. The last of the birds were fleeing, vanishing over the horizon toward the distant shores of the Pontus. They carried the terror with them, the sound of metal that kills metal. I stood amidst the mangled reeds. My hands shook. Sweat stung my eyes, acrid and salty. I looked at my palms. Rust, blood, and marshmire. A hero? No. In that moment, only exhaustion. Every tendon ached. Around me, only silence and the bodies of birds slowly sinking into the quagmire. The water was becoming a black mirror again. The ground beneath my feet was cold. I knew this wasn't the end, but for now I wanted only one thing, for this smell of iron to finally leave my lungs. I wiped my hands on the grass, but the grime only pushed deeper. I turned and walked away. My steps left deep furrows. I walked without looking back, feeling the marsh close its embrace behind me. My mouth was still bitter, and my head was still ringing with the brass of the crotala, the voice of a god that had forced my heart to beat again. The shores of the Pontus were left behind, but there was no peace. Crete was bucking with madness. Poseidon sent a white death, and Eurystheus sent me to break what a whole nation could not. A white insanity against my own wooden, calloused fingers. The scent of iron. It floods the nostrils before you even realize it's your own blood, or the steam from the beast's maw. The 7th time, or the 8th. Numbers lose their meaning when the world shrinks to the rhythm of your own lungs, rupturing against the raw, oily air that hangs over Hellas like cooling tar. Eurystheus. His voice always sounds distant, as if coming through thick, filthy water. A small man, dissolving in the shadow of his own throne, hiding behind the bronze glint of his guards. He is afraid. His fear has a distinct reek, sour wine, stale sweat, and expensive wool rotting in a damp warehouse. Crete, he hissed, and the word hit the palace floor like a scrap of raw meat tossed to the hounds. An island rocking on the waves, torn from peace, cursed by the one who is accustomed to shaking the earth. The ship groaned. Every plank sang of something vast, cold and alien stirring deep beneath us. Poseidon does not forgive greed, but his punishment always strikes those who stand below the gods. Minos kept the beauty for himself, locked it in the stalls, and in return, Crete received madness. A snow-white, roaring madness that smells of torn earth, scorched stone, and a death rattle. I walked the valley. The cypresses stood motionless like rust-covered sentinels at a forgotten funeral. The air was thick, tacky with the scent of crushed wild herbs and rotting needles. The silence was so dense you could peel it off your face like old, dirty gauze. And then came the sound. It wasn't the roar of an animal. It was the groan of the earth itself, violated by heavy, white-hot hooves. I felt it before I saw it. The vibration climbed from my soles to my knees, sticking like a cold lump in my spine. The air turned searing, parched, as if someone had flung open a furnace door. He emerged from the haze, massive, white as a bone bleached by the sun beneath the walls of Troy. His eyes, there was no malice in them, only a red, pulsing void. Madness isn't a disease, it's a divine fire that incinerates everything inside, leaving only a shell that must kill just to keep from burning alive. A step, another. Dust settles on the lips, the bitter taste of stone ground to powder and dry dung. He charged. The world vanished. Nothing remained but this white mass hurtling toward me with the inevitability of a landslide. Time stretched, turning viscous like cold resin. I saw every hair on his crest. I saw his nostrils flare, heaving out hot steam laced with yellow bile. A dodge. The rush of air scorched my side, stealing my breath. I missed death by a hair's breadth. Again. He wheels around, burying hooves in the muck near a dried-up spring. Slick mud flies into my face. A gray veil clouds my vision. I am no hero. I am a tool, an old rusted knife in the hands of the gods, which they use sloppily to muck out their stables. The leap. Thigh muscles spasmed with tension, catapulting my body upward, fingers locked into coarse fur. It was hot, nearly searing the skin like scorched copper. The bull shuddered. Beneath me was no beast. Beneath me was an element, a living mountain of ravaged muscle that wanted to crush, to tear, to shed this sudden, intolerable weight. I clamped my knees. He writhed under me like a molten tectonic plate. Every jolt of his spine echoed in my vertebrae with a dull crack. I felt the massive knots of muscle rolling under the hide, hard as granite. The bull slammed his full mass against a rock wall, trying to grind me into pulp. Pain in my shoulder flared into a white, blinding light. The impact punched the oxygen from my chest, leaving only a whistle of emptiness in place of breath. I heard my tendons snap, but I did not let go. Slick sweat mingled with blood, making the coat slippery. The bull reared, almost vertical, and the world flipped. The sky was beneath my feet, and the gouged, hoof-torn earth plummeted into the abyss of my eyes. I felt his hot, acrid saliva splash against my chest. He tossed his head with such force that my teeth clattered, bruising my tongue. The taste of iron in my mouth became thick, unbearable. The ringing in my ears sharpened into a thin, high whistle that made my head swim. A jerk of the head, and my shoulder strikes a massive horn. A blunt, heavy ache. Then a warm trickle under my arm. I didn't strike him. Why strike something that is already dead inside from the pain? I simply held on. My fingers closed around his neck like an iron hoop, tightening a dry barrel. I became part of him. Every surge, every curve of his spine resonated in my bones as a painful echo. We danced this horrific dance among the trampled olives, and the sun rolled slowly toward the horizon, indifferent to which of us would fall into this ash first. The exhaustion came suddenly. It slumped over me like a wet, stenching blanket. My hands began to shake with a fine, uncontrollable tremor. My fingers went numb, turning alien and stone-cold. I felt the bull's heart beating against my leg, rapid, panicked thuds, a broken rhythm, the death throes of a will that knew no bounds. And then he gave up. He just exhaled. All that pressure, all that fury left him in one long, rasping sound, like stone grinding against stone. He dropped to his knees. I felt the tension drain from his body, leaving only a hollow, ringing fatigue, the same as mine. We stared at a single point, into the gray dust. There in the dirt lay the crushed fruit of the olives, black stains on a filthy background. I climbed off. My legs wouldn't hold. The ground beneath me swayed like the deck of that cursed ship that brought me here to die. "Go," I rasped. My voice was a stranger's voice, shredded as if I'd swallowed broken glass. He stood up, obedient, no chains, no ropes, only the void in his eyes where Poseidon's fire once burned. Now he was just a large, broken animal, his very essence extracted. The sea was cold. We walked into the water. First the sand, stinging my battered, swollen feet. Then the surf, washing away the grime and clotted blood, leaving only the sharp burn in open wounds. The bull did not fear the water. He swam, and I sat upon his back, clutching his crest with wooden fingers. Around us, a blue, cold desert. The waves lifted us and lowered us with indifferent slowness. I closed my eyes. It felt as though we weren't moving at all, that we were just rocking in the womb of the world, where there are no kings, no senseless orders, no sins to be redeemed with the price of one's own flesh, only the rhythmic, soothing motion of the mighty body beneath me. The dolphins. They seemed like a hallucination born of blood loss, silvery shadows stitching through the dark water like needles. Were they laughing at us, or pitying two broken beasts, or perhaps paying tribute to a victor? I felt small, smaller than this foam that vanished instantly into the ocean's depths. Mycenae met us with the smell of fear and cheap brass. Eurystheus. I saw his face for only a second, a pale, trembling smear in the slit of a high window. He fled, tangling himself in his own robes. Cowardice is its own kind of madness, only it gives no strength. It just quietly rots the soul from within, turning it into slime. I released the beast by the city walls. He walked away, slowly, heavily treading his hooves over the sharp cobblestones. I watched his back, and I knew this wasn't the end. His madness would return the moment he smelled the wild grass. My pain wouldn't vanish either. The gods don't give peace. They only change the scenery in this theater of the absurd. I stood at the gates. The sun was setting behind the mountains, staining the world the color of watered-down, stagnant wine. I knew that tomorrow there would be another senseless order. Another road leading nowhere, because redemption isn't an event or a feat. It's an endless road through the muck that has no end, only brief stops to wash the latest layer of blood from your hands. The bull vanished into the evening haze of the isthmus roads. Theseus. Someone else will finish this one day, turning it into a new legend. One day someone else will drive a cold knife in where I only squeezed my fingers until they bled. But for now there is only this ringing silence, and the taste of iron on my lips, and the heavy stone of fate which I must keep rolling until I finally break. The bull became a shadow in my memory. Thrace met me with the stench of cannibalism. Diomedes' horses didn't know oats. They only knew the scream and the taste of human flesh. That was where I lost Abderus. That was where I realized that my strength kills everything I touch. Another mindless command. Once more I am forced to do what no mere mortal could endure. Eurystheus. I watched his face turn gray with every return. He didn't want horses. He wanted to see my bones splinter between the teeth of Thracian monsters. This eighth labor wasn't a test. It was a death sentence wrapped in a king's will, festering in his wretched fear of my strength. We sailed north. The ship cut through black water. Beside me stood Abderos, son of Hermes. There was a lightness in his movements I no longer remembered in myself. His skin knew no scars, only the warmth of the sun. A small band of volunteers, men who believed in my invulnerability, even as I felt nothing but the weight of my own muscle and the cold wind battering my chest. Thrace met us not with a shore, but with a stench, a heavy, cloying smell of decay that choked out the sea salt. The wind carried it from the stables of Diomedes. There was no hay there. They knew no golden oats, only meat, only the torn fibers of those the sea had cast onto these cursed rocks. Every foreign soul seeking refuge here became fodder. 4 mares, fed on fear and human marrow. A step into the darkness of the stable, dust underfoot mixed with ground bone. In the gloom, eyes burned, not equine, other, glazed with madness. When the chains shattered, they screamed, a neighing that made the cliffs above us shudder, a vibration that traveled through my feet to my very spine. They were preparing to lunge. They tasted fresh blood in the air. I gripped the reins, my muscles locked, straining at the threshold as I wrenched their muzzles away from Abderus. They lunged, rasping, their hooves striking sparks from the stone. There was no taming here, only the raw strength of a demigod pitted against the primal fury of cannibals. I barely held this living chaos in check on the path to the shore. The coarse leather of the reins bit into my palms, flaying my calluses to the raw meat of the hand, while the mares followed, mesmerized by their own greed and the scent of blood to come. They remained rabid beasts every second, waiting only for a flicker of weakness. The masts were in sight. The air was a thick sludge of pitch, wet wood, and the illusion of rescue. But the sea was too far. We were out of time. I didn't hear the hoofbeats first. I heard the earth groan under the weight of iron. A roar rising from the depths of the hinterland. Diomedes had raised his entire army. Metal on metal, thousands of feet, the fury of a cheated tyrant. They closed in faster than we could unfurl the sails. The air grew hot with the breath of an army, as thirsty for our blood as those horses were. Abderos. I had no choice. I heard the army closing in, and I needed my hands free for the club. I entrusted him with the reins, knowing the mortal risk. I saw his thin wrists. I knew the horses remained unbroken, but the emptiness inside whispered, "He is the son of Hermes. He must manage." I left him there on the shore, alone with creatures that saw him only as prey. I hurled myself toward the thunder of the Thracian line. The whistle of arrows, the dull thud of shield hitting shield. Combat is not a dance. It's when your mouth turns salt with blood and your lungs have no room for a scream. You don't strike because you hate. You simply have no time for hate. You strike because your arm knows the trajectory of the blow better than your mind. Time shifted. A minute felt like an eternity. An hour passed like a single sword stroke. I saw the eyes of men dying under my club, and in each of them was astonishment. Then I heard the cry. It wasn't long. It was short, a choking sound as if someone had snapped a string. When I returned to the shore, having scattered what was left of the army, the sand was no longer gray. It was dark, wet. The horses stood over what remained of the boy. They weren't chewing. They just stared at me with those fire-rimmed eyes, thick pink foam dripping from their muzzles. The momentary submission I had wrung from them by brute force evaporated the second I let go of the reins. My confidence that I could control the chaos became his death warrant. My divinity, my physical dominance, it was all worthless because I could not be in 2 places at once. He was swallowed by the very rage I had momentarily broken, but failed to destroy. The world went silent. The crash of the surf died. The screams of the dying faded. Only this smell remained, the scent of fresh, young blood mixed with horse sweat. Diomedes. His skin was cold as I dragged him by the hair over the jagged rocks. He screamed something, begged for mercy. I heard no words. I heard only the rasp in my own chest. My hands were shaking, not from horror, but from a surplus of power that had nowhere to go. The bronze mangers waited. I brought him to the place where he had built his hell for years. I threw him into the trough like a bundle of spoiled hay. Watch. I forced myself to watch. A human does not tear apart as easily as it seems. It takes effort. I saw Podargos sink her teeth into his shoulder. I heard the ribs snap. Diomedes didn't scream for long. His lungs filled quickly with his own fluid. His own mares, raised on the flesh of strangers, now savored the taste of their creator. And then came the silence, the most terrible silence of my life. They finished him. They licked the bronze until it shone. Sated by the one who taught them to kill, they suddenly grew still. The wild rage that fed on human flesh flickered out. They became docile like common workhorses. But it wasn't the docility of an animal. It was the exhaustion of monsters that had finally closed the circle of their hunger. Abderos. Later, years from now, I will build a city in his honor. There will be games, lavish, loud, with the roar of crowds and the flash of steel. But that is for later. For now, only silence, an emptiness in my chest that no stone of any wall can fill. Then came the road back. The horses followed me like shadows. They needed no chains. Eurystheus, a little man in a bronze jar. He reeked of fear so strongly that the horses didn't even look his way. He waited for my death, and I brought him his own nightmares. I watched him hide, and it filled me with nothing but loathing. Mount Olympus, slopes where the air is so sharp it cuts the throat. I let them go. They didn't run. They just walked into the forest, slowly, placing their heavy legs with effort. They say wild beasts tore them apart at the foot of the mountain, that the gods would not tolerate such abominations in their woods, or perhaps they simply could not exist in a world where there was no one left to feed them on human pain. I am no hero. I am simply the one who learned to live with the void in his chest after every strike. The sun rises over Mycenae. It is cold. I wait for the next command, not because I must obey, but because in the silence I begin to hear the crunch of bones in the bronze mangers. And that sound is the only thing that reminds me I am still alive. The Thracian stables finished their last meal, and already they were prepping a ship for the east. A child's whim, the king's daughter, cost the lives of a whole nation of warrior women. A golden belt that was meant to be a gift became a shroud for the Amazon queen. Salt. That's the first thing that comes back when you close your eyes. Not blood. Blood is sweet, heavy, like molten copper. This is the salt of sweat stinging your eyes, mixing with the dust of Themyscira. The salt of the Augean, ground into your pores, through long days of rowing through the Hellespont, into the black void of the Euxine Sea. It bites into the shallow scratches on your forearms, a reminder that you're still alive. For now, the deck timbers felt too thin under bare feet, the crack of cedar, the groan of the masts. We didn't go there for glory. Glory is Eurystheus's disease, his own refined fever. This time he didn't even bother to spring his own trap. He simply caved to a whim of his daughter, Admete. She wanted a toy, Hippolyta's golden girdle, a gift from Ares, a symbol of power for which an entire nation was ready to rot in the earth. We crossed half the world to satisfy the craving of a girl who had never seen steel shear through muscle. That girdle wasn't just a trophy, it was the metallic incarnation of recognition. Ares, the god of pure fury, forged it from brass and willpower, gifting it to Hippolyta at the foot of the Caucasus as the mark of her sovereignty. She was Arrhea, the one who most resembled her father in the art of killing. As long as that artifact cinched her waist, she was immune to fear, a living banner defying all of Hellas. Strength belongs to no gender. It belongs to the one capable of holding it. So said the god of war. When our galleys moored at the mouth of the Thermodon, I expected a hail of arrows. I expected the sky to turn black with feathered death. But we were met with silence. The wild, startled silence of Themyscira. My fingers, used to gripping the club until the knuckles turned white, suddenly felt clumsy. I demanded a meeting, against my own nature, against the habit of crushing skulls first and counting the dead later. Hippolyta. She didn't smell like I expected. Not of animal fat or the reek of battle. She carried the scent of the dry steppe and saffron. When she stepped onto my ship, time slowed. It wasn't a divine peace, but the kind of silence that precedes an alpine slide. I saw the pulse in her neck. Rhythmic. Calm. She wasn't afraid. The girdle of Ares had burned the fear out of her heart. It was more irritating than open enmity. The massive, scar-torn hands of heroes against her slender iron wrists. She smiled, simply, without guile. She was ready to give it up, this cursed gift, as a gesture of respect, without a single drop of blood. But a peaceful ending is not for the gods. Hera. Her rage is like the sky above, an inescapable curse, as certain as a stone's fall to the earth. She took the form of an Amazon, dissolved into them, became part of the crowd. I felt her presence before she even spoke, a cold draft on a sunny day. And then came the scream. It tore through the air like a rusted blade through linen. The strangers are kidnapping our queen. They have come to make us slaves. It hit like a spark in a dry August steppe. A second, and the air turned sharp. The Amazons, seizing bows and spears, lunged at our camp. The war maiden's cavalry charged with frantic fury. The earth bucked under the hooves, jarring the last of our senses loose. The sound of 1,000 bowstrings releasing at once. It's not a roar, it's a dry rustle, like locusts in July. An impact. My shoulder throbbed with a dull heat. An arrow grazed me, leaving a trail of fire. I don't look. No point. My lungs tighten, forcing air out in short stabs. Inhale, dust. Exhale, iron. I saw her eyes, just for a moment. There was no betrayal in them, only a shock that was quickly glazed over by a cold film of rage. She thought it was me. I decided it was her. A trap. Time turned into torn rags. The mud underfoot became slick. Sludge mixed with river water and the things leaking from ruptured bodies. You stop being a man. You become iron, void of will, possessing only a function: to crush. Every swing of the sword is an effort that tears a groan from the depths of the gut. Aella. The fastest, like the shadow of a lynx in the brush. Her spear sang past my ear. I felt her body shudder when my blade met her ribs. It wasn't heroic. It was foul. The crunch of bone you don't hear with your ears, but feel through the hilt of the weapon, straight into your elbow. She fell into the dust, and the dust turned black instantly. Protoia. 7 victories. She attacked with the fury of a wounded lioness. I saw her eyes, flooded with sweat. We breathed in the same rhythm. A wheeze on the intake, a blow on the out. The strike of a shield against teeth. That salt taste again. She choked on her own blood before my knife found the gap in her armor. What for? Emptiness. Combat isn't a song. It's a ringing in the ears that makes you want to howl. It's the stench of entrails and heated metal. The sun was setting, staining the river the color of copper, and in that red haze I saw Hippolyta. She wasn't running, she was coming for me, and her gold was blinding. I don't remember the strike, only the sensation of weight remains. She fell forward onto me. Her fingers caught the mane of my lion skin for a second. I felt the heat of her breath on my neck. One last wet exhale. I leaned down. The gold of the girdle was warm. From her, I undid the buckles. Bloodied fingers slipping on the metal. The golden chain felt like nothing more than heavy iron now. No magic, only the sensation of a vast, senseless loss. Somewhere off to the side, Theseus was dragging Antiope toward the ships. I heard her scream, but it sounded distant, as if it were happening underwater. My men were looting the tents. They were laughing. Their laughter hit the cliffs of Themyscira and bounced back, distorted. Cold. The sudden nocturnal cold of the steppe pierced to the bone. I looked at my hands. Massive, covered in soot and clotted blood, they held what we came for. We sailed back. The wind blew at our backs as if the earth itself wanted to spit us out of its embrace. I sat at the stern, staring at the dark water. The girdle lay beside me, wrapped in a dirty rag. I close my eyes and hear the rustle of bowstrings again. Eurystheus took the gift with trembling hands. Admite. She didn't even glance at the stains that wouldn't wash off the gold. She just tried it on in front of a mirror. She laughed, and all I felt was the salt eating into my eyes, and how something inside me finally hardened, turning into a stone heavier than the sky Atlas holds. This was the 9th time I died along with those I killed, but this time I'm not sure I came back. The edge of the world, where the sun drowns in the ocean, the red cattle of a giant were grazing. Libya's heat scorched my brain, and Gerion's 3 torsos promised a swift end. I tore the cliffs apart to pass through, never knowing that the true weight of the world was still waiting ahead. Sand in my mouth. Tastes like ground brick. It grinds against my teeth, mixing with thick, salty spit. 9 times I returned to Mycenae, and each time Eurystheus's face grew more translucent, like a sun-dried fish bladder. Now he wanted color. Red. Living blood grazing where the sun plunges into the salt abyss, at the very edge of the world, where reality blurs into a mirage. Libya was endless. The air there isn't just hot, it's heavy. It has the weight of molten bronze pressing against your eyeballs. Every step is a battle with the globe itself, trying to drag you down into the dry, scorching dust. The horizon shivered, warping the cliffs, turning stones into ghostly giants mocking your thirst. Helios, a golden pupil, searing the mind. I remember the skin on the back of my neck cracking from the heat. It wasn't a hero's rage, it was the primal fury of a beast cornered by the light. My head spun. My fingers found the cold, almost alien smoothness of the bow. The wood felt too dry. It groaned under my hands like an old bone. The string, twisted from gut, bit into my fingertips, promising pain. I didn't think of the gods. I just wanted to knock that goddamn eye out of the sky. The arrow soared. Time congealed like black resin on a pine cut. I heard my own pulse, a loud, jagged thrumming in my ears that drowned out the whistling wind. 1 heartbeat. 2. Silence. Then came the voice. It wasn't human. It was the roar of a mountain landslide, scalding and majestic. Helios didn't incinerate me. He was struck by this raw, savage defiance, the sheer nerve of a mortal, ready to pierce the heart of heaven with an iron tip. "You want to reach the edge of the world?" the god asked. His words scorched, but there was no malice, only wonder at a creature that knew no fear. "Then sail in my cup." He gave me his golden vessel, a massive chalice that smelled of ozone and evening damp. Sailing in the sun, with the ocean seething beneath you, feeling the movement of the abyss under a thin layer of gold. It's like sleeping in the womb of a fire beast, knowing it could wake and swallow you at any moment. It was that audacity which the god called courage that opened the gates to the west for me. There, where the earth crumbles under the pressure of 2 continents, I stopped. My shoulders burned. My back muscles bulged like a blacksmith's bellows, filling with leaden fatigue. I shoved my fingers into the cracks of the cliffs. The stone was coarse. It tore my nails, driving sharp shards of granite under the skin. I pushed them apart, not for glory, but because they stood in my way. Gibraltar is just a scar on the face of the world, carved by my bloodied fists. The pillars, monuments to my exhaustion. Beyond lay only mist, clinging to the skin like wet, unwashed wool. Erythea smelled of raw meat, seaweed, and upturned earth. Orthus, a two-headed stump of malice, bred in the belly of darkness, a spawn of Typhon himself. When he lunged from the fog without warning, I felt no fear, only the weariness of having to kill something so hideous once again. His growl resonated in my lungs, vibrating in the empty cage of my ribs. I raised the club. One motion. The sound was dull, wet, like someone crushing an overripe gourd. Warm, sticky fluid splattered my sandals, filling the gaps between my toes, mixing with the dust of Erythea. Then came Eurytion, a herdsman who thought a staff in his hand made him a warrior. He charged, and in his eyes I saw only a stupid, devoted loyalty to his three-bodied master. The fight was short and filthy. I felt the wood of my club meet his collarbone. The snap was dry, like breaking kindling in winter. The next blow caught his temple. Death on this island was mundane, stripped of epic speeches. Just a slumped body, the crunch of vertebrae, and a final breath into the mud, instantly swallowed by the surf. Geryon emerged from the damp dark like a mountain that had decided to go for a walk. 3 torsos fused into one solid knot of muscle. 6 arms, 6 shields, 3 heads breathing in unison, creating a single heavy rhythm. His footsteps made my internal organs shudder, as if they wanted to flee my body before my soul did. Time broke again, shattering into small, sharp fragments. I saw every bead of sweat rolling down his many chests, glistening on the skin like grease on a spit. I saw the skin tighten over his ribs as he took a deep, triple breath. My own muscles burned, begging for rest, throbbing with tension. But my head held only a cold, transparent void. Pure survival instinct, stripped of thought. I knew to get closer was to be torn to pieces by 6 arms, crushed under the weight of this biological anomaly. The arrow was wet with the Hydra's venom, black, oily bile that eats the very fabric of life, still holding the warmth of the swamp where I took it. The bowstring sliced my index finger to the bone, blood seeping under the nail, making the grip slick and dangerous. One exhale. The arrow tore through the air with the sound of old, heavy canvas being ripped apart. It pierced through all 3 of Geryon's bodies, stitching them together in a lethal knot, threading through lungs and hearts beating out of sync. The giant fell slowly, very slowly. I watched the fire die in his eyes, one by one from one head to the next, like someone snuffing candles in a vast empty hall. The sound of his carcasses hitting the earth punched the last of the air out of my own body. The emptiness after the impact was so deep I almost stopped feeling my own weight. There was only silence, broken by the lowing of the red herd. But the real hell is the labor. The cattle, thousands of hooves kicking up dust that clogs your nostrils and settles on your sweaty back in a gray crust. You walk for weeks, months, and your world narrows down to the smell of dung, the sickly sweet stench of livestock, and the endless mooing. In Italy, under a scorching sun that gave way to ice-cold nights, Cacus decided to test my patience. He stole the cows by their tails, naively hoping his cleverness would save him. But I heard the world differently. I felt the vibration of the mountain. When I tore open the entrance to his cave, my nails were ripped, my fingers bleeding, leaving red streaks on the gray stone. His throat under my palms felt thin like a reed. When the light in his eyes vanished, I simply tossed his body aside like a used rag. And then came Hera. Her rage had no form, only the buzzing of a million gadflies. The herd went mad. Redbacks scattered across the Thracian crags like sparks from a hammer strike. I gathered them, one by one. Dirt caked under my eyelids. Ice froze my beard during night crossings over the passes. I slept in the muck, covered by the lion's skin, which had long since stopped smelling like a beast and started smelling like me. My sweat, my blood, my despair. You're no longer a hero in golden armor. You're a hunted dog, dragging other beasts out of the thorny brush. The days blurred into one gray streak of pain in the knees and lower back. Every cow found was not a victory, but just another step in a long line toward a finale I was no longer waiting for. When I finally drove them to the gates of Mycenae, I was hollow. There wasn't a spot on me left unscarred, scars layered upon scars. Eurystheus trembled. He came out to meet me, smelling of perfumes that couldn't hide the stench of his weakness. He looked at the cattle, red as hardened lava, but he was afraid to look me in the face. In my eyes remained the reflection of Helios's golden cup and the black poisonous bile of the Lernean Hydra. He slaughtered them all, ordered them sacrificed to the gods he feared more than he respected. The sacrificial smoke rose to the sky, thick, sweet, and nauseating. All my labor, all that pain, all those months in the Thracian mud turned to ash in a matter of hours. But I didn't care. Now, when I close my eyes, I don't see the cattle. I don't see Eurystheus. I feel the string cutting the skin on my finger again. I feel the cold of the gold beneath my feet and hear the ocean breathing under my boat. This isn't a story about victory. It's a story about how far a man can go when he has nothing left but his own will. I can still hear it, lowing somewhere in the dark. The last cow, the one I never found in the mountains. She is me, lost among the rocks, under the gaze of laughing gods. Breathe. Just breathe through the dust. Until the next time, until the next blood. The pillars stand. They aren't made of stone. They are made of my memory, and they are heavier than the whole damn world. The red cows were slaughtered, but immortality isn't earned so easily. Eurystheus craved the gold from the garden of the Hesperides, a path known to no one, save for the Titan who holds up the sky. I put my shoulders under the celestial sphere, and in that moment I understood. This whole world is just a burden that splinters bone. The shadow of the tyrant's threshold is always cold. It doesn't come from the sun. It comes from the fear that has soaked into the stone. Eurystheus doesn't look me in the eye. He stares at my sandals, stained with the red clay of Argolis, his voice a rustle of dry scales. The 11th time. This time he didn't want the blood of a monster or the cleaning of a stable. He wanted a dream, impossible and hollow. "Bring me the apples of the Hesperides," he hissed, a glint of sickly greed in his eyes. Apples, gold that grants eternity. These were no mere fruits. They were a wedding gift from Gaia herself to Hera, golden spheres grown on a tree at the edge of night. There, where the sky doesn't just soar, but leans heavily upon the shoulders of a Titan. Every apple is sunlight frozen in time. They say whoever bites into that skin will forget the frailty of muscle and the brittleness of bone. Eurystheus, trembling in his own insignificance, wanted to buy himself immortality with my hands. He was looking for a way to be rid of me, sending me to a place from which even gods do not return. No mortal, no demigod, knew the path to the garden. Even the dwellers of Olympus lost themselves in the mists of the west, where existence ends. How many times can you die before it becomes a habit? The road is not measured in miles. It is the dirt under the fingernails and the salt on the lips. The Salii breathes of rot, Epirus of sharp stones that cut the soles of the feet. I ask the way, but people hide their faces in their hands. Their fear is sticky, like tar. They don't know where the West is. They only know that the sun dies there every evening in a puddle of its own blood. The river Eridanus. I stood with my bare feet sunk in the silt, feeling the river muck swallow my sandals. The water was cold enough to make the teeth ache. They didn't emerge from the foam. They seeped through the roots of old willows, as if wept by the river itself. Nymphs, daughters of Zeus and Themis, skin the color of river dace, hair a tangle of weeds clutching dead minnows. Their fingers, cold and thin as reeds, brushed my scars. They knew why I was here. In these lands every stone knew of Eurystheus's madness. Nereus, whispered the eldest, her face a blurred mask of wet clay. It wasn't a name, it was a sentence. Only the old man of the sea could find the trail through the mists of the west. I found him on a desolate shore. He was sleeping, encrusted with shells like a corpse washed up for the crabs. The moment my fingers locked around his throat, the god began to thrash, blurring his own form. He didn't want to yield the secret. He wanted to vanish, to become anything other than a captive. First, slick scales, a monstrous fish struggling in my arms, wrenching my joints with wet thrusts of its tail. Then, a savage roar. In my embrace, a frenzied lioness suddenly materialized. Her maw, full of jagged fangs, snapped inches from my face. The lion skin on my own shoulders recognized the living flesh. Claws tear at my forearms. I feel the hot blood run down my ribs. Do not let go. Then, fire. The old man erupted, searing my skin. Real, yellow, spiteful fire. The hair on my arms crackles. The smell of scorched meat fills my nostrils. The ringing in my ears becomes unbearable, like 1,000 cicadas screaming at once. Water. Now he became a rushing torrent, trying to flow through my fingers. My palms close on emptiness, but I hold the very essence of this water, the very idea of fluidity, until my muscles vibrate with exhaustion. My will was harder than the rocks. Squeeze, harder still, until the bones begin to groan. He broke. His body took on human form again, a heavy-breathing old man who accepted defeat. Go to the edge of Libya, the god wheezed, there where the sun plunges into the ocean. Libya is a yellow death. The sun strikes the crown of the head like a blacksmith's hammer. Every breath is a gulp of scorched sand. The desert tried to suck the moisture from my body, and the sandstorms lashed my face. Antaeus. He wasn't a man. He was an outgrowth on the body of the earth, a son of Poseidon and Gaia. His laugh was a mountain landslide. His law was simple. Every traveler had to wrestle him to the death. A giant, drunk on his own power, he wanted to build a temple to his father out of human skulls, and he was missing only mine, the skull of a son of Zeus. When we locked together, I felt I wasn't fighting a man, but a mountain. The fight was brutal. 3 times I threw him to the ground, breaking his ribs. I heard the dry snap, but the moment his skin touched the sand, he surged back up, growing larger. His skin soaked up the strength of Mother Earth, like a dry sponge drinks water. Wounds closed before my eyes. Muscles swelled with new power every time he fell into her embrace. Fatigue came suddenly. My arms grew heavy like the columns of a temple. Antaeus pressed in, his breath smelling of raw earth and the grave. If he falls, I lose. I shifted my tactic. I locked my arms around his waist and lifted. It wasn't just an effort, it was a tearing of my own flesh. I hoisted his massive body high into the air, severing his connection to the earth. He thrashed like a fish on a hook, pleading, wheezing, vainly trying to reach his toes toward the yellow sand that offered salvation. I held him, unflinching, tightening my iron grip until the life left him. The earth could not help her son while he hung in nothingness. When I cast aside his lifeless carcass, it fell with the weight of dead stone. The Caucasus. A place where the stone has learned to scream. The stench of torn flesh and ancient suffering hung in the air like fog. I saw Prometheus from a distance, a colossal shadow chained to the rock, paying daily for the fire. And the eagle, its wings flapped like wet canvas hitting stone. The bird descended to peck at the liver that had already grown back overnight. It was an eternal cycle of hell. When the arrow broke that cycle, the eagle fell. When the club shattered the chains, Prometheus did not fall to his knees. He slowly raised his head, and for the first time I felt a gaze that weighed more than the mountains of Epirus. In his eyes, not gratitude, but a knowledge of all that was and all that is to be. Your strength, Prometheus's voice sounded like the rustle of dry leaves, yet it held the power of a wind that grinds mountains. Your strength is a curse, son of Zeus. Zeus gave it to you so you would do the bidding of petty kings until it destroys you. He looked at my hands covered in the black blood of the eagle. I felt that blood burn my skin like acid. You have come for the apples of the Hesperides. The Titan shuddered, and a black fluid leaked from his torn muscles. You think you will kill Ladon? The immortal dragon that never sleeps senses a warrior from 1,000 paces. Your rage is but a beacon for him. It shows him where you are. I gritted my teeth. My will was harder than the rocks, but the Titan's words cut through it like a blade. Go to Atlas. Prometheus stared into the void of the west. Freedom. It is what all desire. Go and give him a taste of that freedom. Let Atlas pluck the apples. Only he who holds the sky can pass the dragon, for he is part of that sky. I took this as truth. Soon I heard a rumble like eternal thunder. The edge of the world. Here the earth drops away into the boundless ocean. Atlas. His figure was more majestic than any mountain. Upon his shoulders lay the celestial sphere, vast, shimmering with stars, heavy as existence itself. The Titan's muscles quivered, his knees were driven into the bedrock, and his face was frozen in a mask of infinite pain. I have come for the apples of the Hesperides, I shouted through the roar of the waves. Atlas looked at me from beneath the vault. In his eyes, envy for a mortal who can freely move his feet. I will bring them, he boomed, a voice like a rock slide. But who will hold the sky? The dragon is my enemy, but my daughters will give the apples to me. Only the universe must not fall to the earth. Remembering the words of Prometheus, I stepped forward. I will hold it. It is impossible to describe. I felt the eons-old stillness of the Titan flow into my veins, searing them to ash. The sensation that everything that exists, every star, every cloud, every gust of wind, is pressing personally against your spine. My feet sank into the earth up to the ankles. I felt my skull begin to compress, my bones emitting a dry crack. Every star, every surge of cosmic wind bore down on me. The sky was not light, it was dense, iron, merciless. Time vanished. Hours passed that felt like centuries. There was only breath. Short, ragged. Inhale, hold, exhale, don't fall. I became a living pillar of the world, realizing that the life of everyone now rested on my shoulders. I heard my vertebrae shifting, my tendons straining until they were like iron cables. Blood pulsed in my temples, sweat blinded my eyes. Atlas returned. 3 golden fruits shone in his hands, but there was no shame in his eyes. Freedom is sweeter than apples, he thundered, and the sound of his voice nearly threw me into the abyss. I myself will carry them to Mycenae. And you have proven you are worthy to bear this weight. Farewell, son of Zeus. I felt something salty flow from my mouth. My teeth were crumbling. The world narrowed to a single point. Don't let the sky fall right now. The plan was born not in my head, but in the instinct of a wounded beast. I had to make him believe I had surrendered. Wait. My rasp was barely audible through the roar of the stars. "You speak the truth, Titan. Free." Atlas stopped. A minute of freedom had made him greedy for my words. I gulped the air, feeling the cosmic cold sear my lungs. Atlas stood beside me. He was light as a feather, and that lightness insulted me more than his betrayal. "I will stay." Every word cost me a torn muscle. "But the sphere, it cuts the bone. The lion skin, it's bunched up. Let me adjust it." I pretended my knee buckled. The sky above us shuddered. The stars swayed like spilled mercury. Atlas grew afraid. Not for me. He feared that this infinite weight would become his reality again before he could escape. "Only for a moment," Atlas growled. He laid the gold on the grass and offered his mighty shoulders once more. His hands, accustomed to this hell, automatically reached upward. The very moment the weight transferred to its owner, I collapsed to the ground. The world didn't just become light, it vanished. I didn't hear Atlas, didn't hear the ocean. Only the way the blood, finally breaking through the constricted veins, scorched my body from within. Every heartbeat echoed in my skull like a blacksmith's hammer. I don't know how long I lay in the dust. Minutes, centuries. I learned to breathe again, breath by breath, pushing the cosmic cold out of my lungs. When I finally could open my eyes, the gold of the apples in the grass seemed the only thing with any weight in this precarious world. I slowly picked up the apples. They were cold, incredibly cold, pleasantly cooling my scorched palms. "Forgive me, Atlas," I said, looking into the Titan's enraged eyes. "To each his own burden. You were created to hold the sky, and I, to follow the orders of kings, to atone for my own guilt." The way back was easier, though the gold in the bag weighed more than any metal. I passed the liberated Caucasus, the banks of the Nile, the sands of Libya where tyrants were no more. Eurystheus looked so small. When I entered and laid the apples on the table, the king fell to his knees. He couldn't even touch them. The divine radiance scorched his cowardly soul. It reminded him that true greatness is not in gold, but in the spirit. He ordered them taken away. I brought them as a gift to Athena. The wise goddess returned the apples to the garden of the Hesperides. Mortals have no place among eternity. The 11th time. I laid the gold on the table, but I felt no victory. My mind proved stronger than my bones, but it did not quench the ache in my joints. Now I know the truth. The sky is not light and it is not blue. It is nothing. A bottomless black void that is only waiting for a new pair of foolish shoulders. The garden of the Hesperides has vanished into the mist again. Ladon guards the fruits that brought happiness to no one. My palms still remember the cold of the stars. I do not want divinity. I simply want to close my eyes and no longer feel the gaze of eternity upon me. 11 times I returned. Eurystheus, pale with terror, decided to send me where no one returns from. Hades, Tartarus, the final chain. I was to tear the guardian of hell out by its roots. No weapons, just me and a three-headed horror in the eternal dark. Bronze. It vibrates every time a sandal hits the stone. There, in the gloom of the vat, beneath a bolted lid, huddles the remains of a man. My king, my owner, my sickness, Eurystheus. That isn't a name, it's the cloying scent of rot that has hunted me for 11 years. Sweat stings my eyes, mixing with the dust of Mycenae. I stand. I wait for the command that will be my last. Bring me Cerberus. The voice barely seeps through the slit in the lid. The hound, from the floor of Tartarus. But no sword, no weapon, no armor, just your bare hands. Pull the thing that must never see the sun from the very roots of the world. I turn. Silence is my only shield. South, toward Taenorum, where the earth gapes open, exhaling raw stone and oblivion. The descent is not a path. First the warmth died, then the colors vanished, leaving only the murk of ash and gray rock. In place of the sun there was a void. The air grew thick, like stagnant water, heavy with the billions of voices of those who lost the right to sound. At the threshold, Hermes waited. The messenger did not smile. His sandals were coated in the oily dust of the underworld's roads. "You are crossing a line where blood becomes a burden, brother," he said. "In this darkness there is no flesh for you to pierce." Blood. My blood feels too hot now, too loud. It hammers against my temples like a mallet on an anvil. Thud. Thud. It gets in the way of the silence. The river Styx didn't flow. It crawled like molten lead. Charon stopped his skiff. His empty sockets bored into my living flesh. "This boat will not hold the weight of your sins and your warm meat, living man." I simply stepped aboard. The wood groaned. The boat settled so low the black water kissed the gunwales. The ferryman took no coin. He only leaned into my face, reeking of river silt, and wheezed, "You are already dead, brother. You just haven't learned how to stop breathing." On the far bank, shadows huddled, trying to catch a single spark of warmth from my skin. Medusa the Gorgon, a smoky echo of pain, blocked my path. Instinctively, my hand jerked toward my hip, but my fingers grasped nothing. Nothing here is real. Only me. Only this body, shivering from the cold. Hades' palace has no walls, only endless rows of columns marching into nowhere, propping up a sky of raw ash. The gloom here has mass. It presses not on the shoulders, but on the very thought of escape. Every breath is an effort, as if my lungs are filling with mercury. Hades does not sit upon a throne. He is the throne, a motionless mass of shadow radiating a cold older than the sun. His gaze does not study me. It simply registers my presence. Beside him, Persephone. Her presence is sharp, like a shard of obsidian. Under her stare, I feel my blood slow, turning to cold sludge. The rage that fueled me for 11 years gutters out like a torch, dropped in a swamp. Here, beside her, the idea of being human feels like a senseless mistake. "You have come for the gatekeeper." Hades' voice does not sound. It vibrates in my jaw, knocking the wind from me. It is the roar of an avalanche that has no room for pity or anger. "Many have come for gold or lost souls. You are the first to come for my hound." I want to answer, but my tongue is a heavy scrap of leather. In this place, words have no weight unless they are backed by death. "Take him." Hades' shadow shifted, and I felt a tremor run through the floor. "But leave the iron, leave the pelt. One comes here naked, Heracles. If he tears you apart, you become part of this ash. If you win, you return him to me without a single new scratch." Persephone finally lifts her eyes. In their depths, I see not death, but something worse, the total absence of life. She gives a faint ghost of a nod. I strip off the Nemean lion skin. My last defense. My last tether to who I was. Now I am just a hunk of meat, bone, and will in the center of an infinite night. The cold of the deep clutches my skin with 1,000 tiny needles. I am naked before death. Cerberus waits where the Acheron breaks into the abyss. God, the smell. This isn't the smell of a dog. It's a cocktail of sulfur, decomposed memories, and stagnant spite. 3 heads, 6 eyes burning with phosphoric fire. This is no animal. This is the gut of Tartarus. Instead of fur, a living knot of hissing vipers, sensing warm blood. 3 maws spewed the stench of white-hot iron and scorched copper. The snakes on his neck didn't just hiss. They pulsed in time with his frenzy, seeking out the warm veins beneath my skin. The central head let out a roar that made the stone beneath my feet crumble. He leaps. Wait. A mountain of hate slams me down. Stone bites into my back. My first breath is a lungful of dust and the rot of his gullet. The center head lunges for my throat. I throw up my elbow. Teeth puncture muscle. I hear the crunch of my own flesh. My arm grows heavy. The blood is hot. It flows down my forearm. A viper on his mane stings my shoulder. The venom sears my nerves instantly, like a branding iron. I only grit my teeth. I wrap my arms around him. I try to lock all three necks in a single dead man's grip. It was like trying to stop a rock slide with your bare hands, an uncontrollable, primal shifting of mass intent on grinding you to powder. Cerberus thrangs, slamming me against the jagged rocks. Every impact drives the air out along with the last of my fury. The dragon tail lashes my back, leaving jagged rents that pulse with thick, dark blood, mixing instantly with the black silt of the Acheron into a slick, rusted mire. How long does it last? An hour? A year? There is no time in Hades. There is only the rhythm of the struggle. His necks are taut. My fingers bury into the folds of his skin, hitting the cold scales of the vipers. They bite. The venom burns my nerves. My arm goes numb, but I do not let go. Tendons stretch to the breaking point, ready to snap like parched hawser lines. My bones do not give. They have become part of the monster's bloated blue-black meat. In this pressure, there is no more me and the beast. There is only a single knot of ancient rage and Tartarus. Pain has become the environment, the only proof that my heart still beats. Cerberus wheezes. His snakes feebly spit the last of their venom into the void. His lungs hunt for air that isn't there. Finally, the resistance fades. The hound breaks. His fury leaks out with the foam from his maws. Cerberus collapses, burying all three snouts in the ash, heavy and final, like a mountain lifted from my shoulders. One last convulsive twitch of the tail, then silence. I let go. My arms won't obey me. They are locked in the shape of the chokehold, fingers cramped. I look at my palms. They are black with filth and blood. Mine, his. Does it even matter? I lead him on a chain. The return was endless, measured not in steps, but in spasms. Cerberus fears the world. When we emerged through the cave of Tyainarum, and the first rays of sun touched the hound's bruised hide, he began to thrash in convulsions like a fish on hot stones. Light to him is liquid fire, searing his sockets. Poisonous bile, thick and jaundiced, spills from his maws. Where it touches the soil, aconite springs up instantly, a black flower with the taste of death. Every step I take is torture. The wounds the hound gave me do not heal. They pulse with subterranean cold. My back, shredded by the dragon tail, has begun to fester. The smell of decay follows me, mingling with the stench of Tartarus. My right arm, gnawed to the bone by the vipers, is useless. It hangs as a heavy, numb weight, fingers swollen and blue with venom, barely gripping the rusted chain. I walked through cities, blood-soaked, eyes clouded, dragging a nightmare behind me. People did not greet me. They sang no hymns. They barricaded their doors and shuttered their windows in a trance of terror, hiding their children from the stench and the sight of this living corpse and my monster. This was no triumph. It was a funeral march, crawling slowly and inevitably through the living, leaving behind an unbearable odor and the shadow of eternal gloom. I am no hero. I am a ghost who forgot how to die. Mycenae, the palace. Cerberus's claws scrape against the floor tiles, leaving deep, jagged furrows. In the center of the hall, by the king's chair, The bronze looms, the vat, an architectural deformity rooted into the floor. I stop. The lid lifts slightly. Eurystheus peeks out. His gaze meets the 6 fires of Tartarus. I say nothing. I simply take a step forward, to the very edge of the vat. Cerberus surges forward. His central maw parts, and from it escapes not a roar, but the low, whistling breath of the Acheron. The air in the throne room turns instantly heavy. The torches on the walls hiss, the flames turning blue and crouching toward the floor. A frost creeps over the polished bronze of the vat, a dead, gray film of underworld cold. Eurystheus sees the metal beneath his fingers bloom with rime. That sound, it's not just a lid rattling. There is no king in there anymore. There is only a clump of flesh burrowing into the sediment of its own insignificance. Away! The voice from beneath the bronze has become thin as thread. Take him away. Take it all back. You are free. I stand. 11 years of slavery ended with this metallic clatter in a hall that once welcomed heroes. Freedom turned out to be no light, but simply the absence of a chain on my throat. I turn. The chain in my hand vibrates again. Cerberus snarls at the empty throne, the sound echoing off the walls, shattering the last remnants of Mycenaean majesty. I head south again. I must return the hound. He has no place here, among the sun and the hypocrisy. His place is in the shadow. Footsteps echo against the stone. Step. Pause. Step. I pass through the gates. The silence I brought back with me from under the earth has become my skin. It will not fade. It will be with me always, in the taste of wine, in the smell of dust, in every breath. I am free. But why do I feel as if Charon forgot to take me off the boat? I walk. The shadow of Cerberus stretches behind me on the road, long and hideous. We are going home, into the void. Cerberus has returned to the shadows. The chain has slipped from my hands. Eurystheus hides in his bronze jar, and I stand in the middle of Mycenae feeling nothing. Freedom. No, it's just the absence of a new command. I have done it all. I have become a legend. But inside there is only ash. My name will be remembered forever, but no one, not a soul, would ever want to live a single one of my days.